Barron Trump has always been the most private member of the Trump family, but he could be the key to securing younger votes. When he suddenly appears during a rally, just watch how the crowd reacts. The rally at Trump National Doral Golf Club was the peak of a campaign season already overflowing with anticipation and tension. It was July 2024, and the stakes had never been higher. The election was only months away, and this was a crucial time for everyone involved. Donald Trump, in the thick of his campaign to retake the White House, was back in his element, surrounded by a sea of loyal supporters. But tonight there was a twist that had everyone on edge, from the top strategists in his campaign to his own family members. He had planned a special guest appearance at the rally and would not be swayed against it. As the rally kicked off, Trump delivered his usual blend of fiery rhetoric and crowd-pleasing lines. He spoke of the state of the nation, the need to restore American greatness, and of course launched into his usual tirades against the Democrats. The crowd, as always, was enthralled, hanging on to every word and cheering in all the right places. But behind the scenes, something was brewing, something that would change the tone of the night and possibly the entire campaign. Just days before the rally, Trump had made a decision that caught even his closest advisers off guard. He had decided it was time for his youngest son, Barron, to step into the spotlight. At 18, Barron had remained largely out of the public eye, a mystery even to those who followed the Trump family closely. Where his older siblings embraced the spotlight, Barron had chosen to quietly observe the political world from behind the scenes. However, Trump was a shrewd strategist, and he knew that Barron's presence could inject new energy into his campaign and draw the attention of a younger demographic. At this point, every vote counted, and the more people he could get on his side, the better. As Trump continued his speech, getting more cheers and claps along the way, the participating crowd was oblivious to the tension behind the scenes. But then the moment came, the one that Donald Trump had been so sure about, despite objections even from his other sons. Trump paused, scanning the crowd with a knowing smile, and called out, "Where is Barron? Stand up." The crowd's reaction was instant. Thousands of people turned to find the young man who had been so carefully shielded from the public eye. When Barron Trump suddenly appeared, all eyes turned to him. There was no hiding now, his towering frame made sure of that. As he nervously waved, taking in the atmosphere at his first political rally, the crowd reacted in a way no one could have predicted. Cheers erupted and soon turned into a standing ovation. Trump, ever the politician, seized the moment. Despite his son's clear surprise, the former president's words echoed through the speakers. "Look at him. You're pretty popular. He may be more popular than Don and Eric." The crowd laughed heartily at the joke, but deep inside, Barron was unsure that his father had chosen the right words. No one there, apart from him and his father, knew the battle that had taken place just days before the rally. Barron, who had just graduated from high school and was currently planning out his next steps, was not enthusiastic about the idea of appearing at the rally. At first he had grown up with his parents and siblings in the spotlight, but he had always maintained a low profile. Where his father courted fame in any way possible, Barron preferred to stay private, even more so now that he was getting older and mapping out his future. He didn't need his every move being scrutinized by the press. Yet, despite his reservations, he knew that when his father asked him to stand alongside him and be a part of the campaign, it wasn't really a question, it was an expectation. The young man needed to decide whether to go along with it or speak up. In the days leading up to the rally, Barron was prepped extensively. The campaign team worked with him on everything from his appearance and demeanor to the few words he might say if the moment arose. It was all supposed to look as natural as possible, even if it didn't feel that way. Trump himself had even been paternal, offering his son advice not just as a politician but as a father. That was the moment when the young man knew he'd go along with it. "They'll love you," his father had said, with a confidence that was both reassuring and intimidating. But what if they didn't? What if he caused more harm than good to his father's campaign? It was such immense pressure on young shoulders. This was no ordinary debut. It was a baptism by fire. Before he could even step into the public eye, though, Barron found himself with opposition from within something he'd never expected: Don Jr. and Eric, who had been the public faces of their father's empire for as long as anyone could remember, were wary of Barron's sudden emergence. Was there really a space for their little brother in the campaign? The boy who so far had remained quiet and had observed rather than been involved. It wasn't jealousy per se, but rather a concern about the unknown. Barron was different from them, more reserved, more introspective, and perhaps more cautious. They worried that he might not be able to handle the intense scrutiny that came with being a Trump in the public eye. But Barron was the only Trump child to have lived in the White House during his father's presidency. His reserved nature had worked to his advantage, and he'd witnessed things that had shaped his political views. He was determined to prove his older brothers wrong. This tension came to a head during a strategy meeting at Mar-a-Lago just days before the rally. It was something that neither Donald Trump nor Barron welcomed, but the older Trump siblings had some things to get off their chests. The meeting, which was supposed to be a routine discussion of upcoming campaign events, quickly turned into a debate about Barron's role. Don Jr. and Eric voiced their concerns, questioning whether Barron was ready for the spotlight and whether he even wanted it. The room grew tense as the conversation escalated, with Trump trying to mediate but clearly torn between his loyalty to all his sons. It was time for Barron to finally speak up to prove that he was no longer a child. His voice was measured and calm, but there was a determination that took everyone by surprise. He didn't want to be forced into something he wasn't ready for, but he also didn't want to let his father down. Barron announced that he would attend the rally, but if he was to support the campaign, he had to be allowed to do it in his own way, not as a puppet to his father or his brothers. He had his own voice, and he wanted to use it with their help and guidance. Politically, it was a decision that pleased Trump. He was sure that getting Barron involved in the campaign would be a great success with the younger voters, but as a father, it left him worried. He knew better than anyone the complexities of the world Barron was about to enter. After the meeting, Barron found himself outside, alone with his thoughts. The Florida night was warm, the sound of waves crashing in the distance. He had a decision to make, one that would impact not just him, but his entire family. He knew that stepping back now would be the safer option, but there was also a part of him that was curious, intrigued by the possibilities of what could be if he embraced this role fully. His older brothers loved the spotlight almost as much as their father, but was it what he truly wanted? That was why, when his father joked about him being more popular than his siblings, Barron held his breath, dreading the fallout from the joke. Even though the crowd loved it, in the days that followed, the media went into overdrive. Barron Trump's appearance at the rally was all anyone could talk about. Headlines were laced with speculation: what role would Barron play in the campaign? Was this a sign of things to come? Trump had got what he wanted. His campaign was the focus of the media, and the mystery behind the youngest member of his family was drawing more and more attention. But was this the right thing for Barron? And what would Don Jr. and Eric have to say about it all? As Trump said at the rally, they were all his boys, no matter how old they were, and he hoped that the family unit would remain intact, especially as the election got closer. But back at Mar-a-Lago, it seemed like everyone had something to say. Barron was now seen as a potential bridge to the younger voters, a way to connect with a demographic that had often eluded Trump. The campaign team was buzzing with ideas, but as they pushed for more appearances and more involvement, they began to encounter resistance not just from Barron, but from within the family itself. The Trump family regrouped. Eric and Don Jr. kept a close eye on how things were playing out. The rally had been a success, but now they had to navigate the fallout. Barron found himself in meetings he had never been a part of before, surrounded by advisors and strategists who spoke in rapid-fire political jargon. His father, ever the showman, wanted to capitalize on the momentum, more appearances, more interviews, more exposure. But Barron wasn't so sure. His brothers had always been a part of this world, and he didn't want them to think he was taking over. He was quite happy to step back and let them continue in their roles, but he knew that wasn't what his father wanted. Even the campaign team saw potential in him that they hadn't seen before and were pushing forward their ideas, even though there was unease in the family. For so long, Barron had remained quiet, the most mysterious member of the Trump family. Was that how he wanted to remain? He thought back to the crowd's reaction, the way they cheered just as loudly for him as they did for his dad. And then there were his father's words, a mix of showmanship but with undertones of fatherly pride. His father had told him that people were going to love him, and so far he had been right. But Barron was well aware that everything could change quickly, not to mention that he still had his college education to think about, and he didn't want anything to jeopardize that. As the campaign rolled on, it became clear that the pressure was only going to increase. Barron's presence had energized the base, but it had also attracted attention from those who saw him as a potential weak link in the Trump armor. The scrutiny intensified, with every aspect of his life under a microscope. The stories about his college plans or lack thereof were just the beginning. It was easy to twist the words his father had spoken during the rally. Trump had clearly told the crowd that Barron had been accepted to every college he'd applied for and had made his decision. But now the media news reports painted a picture of a young man floundering with decisions, not knowing what to do next in his life. That sort of indecision and lack of commitment wasn't the norm for the Trumps. Barron's worst fears were coming true. He was becoming a danger to the campaign, even though the reports about college weren't true. It was clear he didn't have a private life anymore. There were whispers of scandal, of secrets waiting to be uncovered. Barron knew that he had to be careful now. Any misstep could be disastrous not just for him, but for the entire campaign. Despite the pressure, Barron remained resolute. He had chosen this path, and now he was determined to see it through, but on his own terms. He began to carve out a niche for himself within the campaign, offering a fresh perspective that even his father came to appreciate. He wasn't just following orders, he was contributing, bringing his own ideas to the table. When he agreed to be part of the campaign, this is what he'd envisioned: a place at the table where he could be heard, not controlled by his brothers, and not saying yes to his father's every request, but working alongside them to secure a second term in office. As July came to a close, the campaign was at its height. The Democratic primaries were in full swing, and the media's attention was divided between the two parties. There were now only 3 months left until the election. The time for sweeping up those final few voters who remained on the fence was now. Barron had joined the campaign at what was arguably the most critical time, and despite his initial reservations, he found that he now had a purpose, a way to stand alongside his father and brothers. The final rally of the month was the biggest yet. Tens of thousands of people packed the venue, and the energy was electric. Trump has always delivered a rousing speech, but this time Barron was right there with him, standing at his side as the crowd roared their approval. It was a moment of validation, a sign that he had made the right choice to stick out the uncomfortable moments. It marked a transition from being a boy to becoming a man. If he could secure more young votes for his father, then his older siblings would have to believe that he was worthy of a spot at the table with them. But as the rally ended and the crowd began to disperse, Barron was left with a mixture of feelings. The cheers, the applause, the adulation, it was all so intoxicating, so overwhelming. He could see why people got hooked on it, but it was also fleeting. The crowd could easily turn, and now he'd put himself in the spotlight. There was no hiding from that. He was pleased with the decisions he'd made so far, glad that he'd suddenly appeared during that Florida rally, happy with the crowd reactions and the slow acceptance of his brothers. But he knew that the real test was yet to come. The election would reveal if his father had been right to bring him on board, and all that Barron could do was wait, with the rest of the country, for the outcome. In the meantime, he just needed to keep that positive crowd reaction going as much as he could. Now, it's over to you. What do you think of this story? Do you think Barron should have stayed out of the spotlight, or is there a place for him in Trump's campaign? We'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.